Joining us now is Newt Gingrich. We're delighted he's with us. Newt, of course, former Speaker of the House. He has his great Defending America course. We have to ask Newt about a lot of things, including the week at the United Nations for President Trump, and also this Alabama runoff, which is going to be held on Tuesday. The president heading down to Alabama. He's on the side of Mitch McConnell and the Chamber of Commerce against Roy Moore, who has all the Trumpites with him. Fascinating. And Newt joins us now. Hey, Newt, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. What about Big Luther versus the Big Judge? Where you come down on that?
Well, I think it's going to be a great test of just what Trump's personal skills are when he's down there today. If he makes a strong enough case, my guess is that Luther Strange will be sent back to the Senate. If he doesn't, my guess is that Roy Moore will win. And I think it's clear. I mean, Trump has made the calculation, along with his team, that being supportive of an incumbent senator who, when it mattered on Obamacare, voted with him, sends an important signal. And we'll see how that plays out.
In other words, that Luther Strange is not a Jeff Flake. I mean, he was actually with Trump on the pivotal issues.
Right. Well, and Flake was too, except he insisted on writing a book attacking Trump. Mm-hmm. But, Flake in that sense has gotten the worst of both worlds right now. But I think in the case of Strange, he was an appointee. The governor had some significant problems and had to resign. Strange never built a personal machine or a personal campaign operation big enough for U.S. Senate race. And Roy Moore is a fixture of Alabama politics. He's been around forever. He represents a repudiation of liberalism and a repudiation of the radical values. And so he has a very big base in Alabama. And this is really quite a race. And I think, I think it probably, because of Trump's intervention, will be too close to call.
I don't think so. I think Moore's going to win by 5. That's my prediction. Moore's going to win by 5 to 8. Well, I don't know. We'll see.
He may. I do think in a very low turnout special election like this, the intensity of your support really matters. And it's clear that Moore's support has enormous intensity.
Well, it's just wild because you have Bannon and Palin, and they said that I came out and endorsed Roy Moore, and I did not. I don't know why I'm on all those lists, but I never endorsed anybody in this race. I'm not going to get involved in every primary contest. It's just not what I'm going to do anymore. But so you have this interesting grouping of people. You have the real populists, the conservative rebels, the people who want to really reshape Washington and return power to the people. Then you have all these establishment figures and organizations, except for Donald Trump, coming and rallying for Luther Strange.
Look,
so it's
I think,
interesting.
I think in a lot of ways, Trump has precisely the challenge of being an incumbent. The team that he's going to get things done with in the U.S. Senate currently is in the U.S. Senate. And he's going to basically be supportive of most of them. Reagan would have done the same thing. Reagan understood that, while he might have preferred to have only Reaganites in the House and Senate, that wasn't a fact. And in fact, the leadership of both the House and Senate were very skeptical of Reagan most of the time. And he had to carry him along by his personal popularity and his ability to reach the country and to speak to the country, which is what I thought Trump did brilliantly in New York. I thought it was an extraordinarily historic UN speech. And I think for anybody who considers themselves a conservative, it's a speech worth studying and really giving you a flavor of how different an American-based, sovereignty-based model is from the globalism and internationalism of the John Kerrys and the Barack Obamas.
No, I completely agree. I thought it was I think it was his best speech, frankly, at the United Nations, and well delivered. He doesn't love doing these teleprompter speeches. Gotten a lot better at them, just as a matter of performance. But the substance was, I think it was Reagan-esque. It was a strong America is going to be better for the rest of the world. A weak America will ensure that evil forces prevail or gain ground, and that's not going to be good for any of you. And I think...
and he also said, look, I'm going to represent my country, but I expect you to represent your country.
Yeah, you to do the same. Yeah. A novel concept, but all the globalists were... they're wailing over there at MSNBC and CNN. Like, how can you do this? We're global citizens, Mr. President. We're global citizens.
Look, there are professors at Yale and Harvard and Princeton who are on the verge of moving to Canada over this kind of stuff.
I love it. I think it's great. Now, let's talk about what's happening on this other big issue of the day, which, of course, is the Obamacare repeal. We talked to Mike Lee earlier, Newt, and he's of the mind that we do need to read legislation before we pass it, since we criticized so many Democrats during the passage of Obamacare for not having done so. And there's no normal course of business here. There's no regular order, as they call it, in Congress. You don't have a piece of legislation, even a framework, that is distributed and read. And so they're talking about legislation that no one has read yet. And he found that, and I find that to be quite disturbing, to say the least.
Well, look, I think that we would be better off, would always have been better off to go through regular order. I think they would still be better off to take it to a committee, have a hearing, have the whole thing out in the open. We live in an age when if you will publish it, it's available to 315 million people instantaneously, and every analyst and every lobbyist in the country is going to look at it carefully and take it apart. But you also know how it's going to divide up. Everybody who wants more money from the taxpayer is going to be opposed to it. So every single health group, every single insurance group, they're all going to get up and say, and including, by the way, a number of governors who think that health is so important it's a moral issue, but don't ask them to raise taxes on their own people. So there'll be a lot of people in line who say, give me the money. They will all oppose this. Now, I agree with Senator Lee. They ought to have it out in the open. They ought to look at all the details because, frankly, I don't want a staff-written bill in which buried in page 714 is a whole set of things you and I would find horrifying. But I do think I think they could go in regular order to the committee. I think the Republicans in the committee would vote it out. I think they could then take it to the floor. And if they worked it next week, they could get it all done. I think the Democrats will do everything they can to sort of draw out the clock, and that will be interesting. I remember one time in Georgia, they had a guy hanging upside down from the balcony, turning the clock back, so that the legislative session didn't end for several more hours because they had run out of time. So exactly how Mitch McConnell will handle the end of this week, I'm not sure. And it might be as simple as just getting consent to hold over for an extra 5 days or something. But I think they will. I think they are up against a deadline. I'm not sure they can get the final vote, if you will. On the other hand, I'm sympathetic to the idea that this is a bill that starts us towards federalism. It starts us towards states having to be responsible. It recognizes Washington does not have the solution. And if you measure it against Obamacare rather than against perfection, it's a dramatically better bill.
Before we let you go, Newt, there's a piece in the Washington Post today. Ed Gillespie, who's running as the Republican for governor in Virginia, Ed Gillespie keeps door open to campaigning with Trump. Would it hurt in the Virginia governor's race? Now, if you were advising Ed Gillespie, who's a establishment Bush Republican, how to beat his Democrat challenger in the gubernatorial race in the Commonwealth of Virginia, knowing how that's kind of a purpley state, what would you recommend that Ed do? Become more of a conservative populist, try to see, well, that's where the party is right now, or kind of try to walk this middle line and, I'm holding out great hope for the president, I want him to be successful, but not campaigning with him. What should he do?
Well, look, first of all, Donald Trump is a fact. There are parts of Virginia where he's very, very popular. It's an off-year governor's race. Turnout matters. And Donald Trump will help turn out the vote. I mean, I find it amazing. If you look at the fundraising parallels, the Democrats nationally are collapsing. The Republicans nationally are doing as well as they have ever done. Now, somehow that suggests to me that the New York Times, Washington Post version of reality isn't very accurate. And I think, Gillespie is a Republican. He's running as a Republican. He ought to say, look, I would expect as governor to work closely with the Republican president to get lots of good things for Virginia. I guarantee you my opponent can't get any of those things and can't work with him. I think that's a lot better position than to look confused.
Yeah. But would you think he should campaign with him?
Sure. I think Trump is a fact. I don't think anybody in Northern Virginia who's going to vote is going to be confused about the fact that Ed Gillespie is a Republican, has been a Republican national chairman, has been involved in electing Republican presidents. So I don't think it cost him any votes, and I think the extra energy Trump may bring to the race may, in fact, turn out some votes who otherwise wouldn't turn out.
Yeah, remember what happened after Obama was elected? Bob McDonnell won the governorship the year later in that off-year election, the same year that Chris Christie won in New Jersey. So there's oftentimes a backlash after the party wins in the state of Virginia. We've seen this happen time and again. Newt Gingrich, it's always great to talk to you. Defending America, of course, fantastic, of course, as always. And give our best, of course, to Callista. We'll take a break on the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. What will a Luther Strange loss in Alabama mean for the president, his party, and his agenda? 855-40-LAURA.